Hello, everyone. My name is Huma Kazi, and I'm a member of the Youth Action Hour team. Thank you for joining us for this segment of Youth Action Hour, where we host a conversation with members of Congress, appointed officials, and federal offices to break down how the government works, policy processes, and key legislation that young people should know. These conversations are meant to be educational, to the point, and laid back. With us today to discuss the Build Back Better Act, the reconciliation process, and the Office of Management and Budget is David Weisshaar. So let's start off with breaking down what your office does in some terms. The first question is, what is the Office of Management and Budget? What is their main role, and how does it assist with the presidency?
The Office of Management and Budget is one of several different policy components of the White House. Our specific role is broken down, I would say, into two general categories, which kind of correspond to the letters in our acronym. The management side of OMB, or the M side as we call it, basically has as its core goal to coordinate government-wide management policies. So that relates to a wide variety of topics. It could relate to personnel policy, it could relate to procurement policy, how the government buys things, could relate to financial management. And so they kind of coordinate that across all of the different federal agencies. The B side, or the budget side, which is the side that I work on, is in charge of essentially overseeing the day-to-day operations of all of the different federal agencies. So you have, these huge sprawling agencies that manage multi-billion-dollar budgets. And it's important to have a sense of how they're operating on a day-to-day basis and to really make sure that the president's goals and the administration's goals writ large are really being carried out on a day-to-day basis. So we really serve in a way as the go-between between the White House and the large federal agencies. In my case, I work with the Department of Labor on job training issues. So I work to make sure that they are implementing the various job training programs that they've been given funding for in a way that advances equity, in a way that ensures that the programs really deliver the results that the president is seeking for the programs. And then the other role, I would just say, in general, we are one of the few parts of the White House structure that is actually civil servants. We're not political appointees. We kind of carry over across administrations. So we kind of also serve as the kind of like longstanding experts on our policy areas. And regardless of who the president is, we take great pride in speaking truth to power and telling them exactly how these programs work, really delivering kind of the tough news sometimes on what the effects would be of different policy changes. We do that across administration as well.
Who pays for the federal budget, and what is the deficit ceiling that everyone is talking about?
Sure, that's a really good question. Really, all money that we spend as the federal government is collectively paid for by all Americans. And it's not necessarily the case that we pay for what we spend in the year that we originally spend it, but we do have to, over time, eventually pay for it. And so that's really what's at the core of the debt limit conversation that has gotten a lot of press recently. Essentially, the US government can't spend limitlessly. There is a ceiling, after which we need congressional action in order to spend above that ceiling. As we've been spending money the last few years to address things like COVID-19, we've increasingly run up against that ceiling. So Congress has to take action each time we want the US government to be able to spend more money. It's a little bit similar to if you imagine you have a credit card limit, but your credit card company doesn't allow you to spend beyond that limit. And so you have to get authorization from them, and they have to increase your kind of credit line before you can spend at higher levels. It's a little bit like that played out over, a $1 trillion scale.
Awesome. Thank you for breaking that down. So where does the reconciliation process fit in with passing the federal budget? And for those of you who are not familiar with this term, we wanted to dive in more and ask, what is the reconciliation process, and why is the Build Back Better Act being passed through this process?
The normal budget process looks like is that every year there's what's called the discretionary budget process. So this is the set of budget items that Congress decides each and every year. This is how much money we want to give towards education. This is how much money we want to give towards defense, towards various other purposes. And they have to make a decision each and every year of how much they want to spend. There's a second set of things, which is called mandatory spending, which are things where the policies and the programs are written into law, and Congress doesn't have to act each year in order to extend them. So think about things like Social Security that your grandparents might get. Those payments, those checks for Social Security go out, and Congress doesn't have to do anything. It's basically on autopilot. So that's considered mandatory spending. And Congress at different junctures addresses each of those kinds of programs, discretionary and mandatory. Reconciliation is kind of a third and kind of unique bucket. It's a process that exists in Senate procedure that allows the government to spend money or to generate new revenue through taxes requiring only 50 votes in the Senate. So most pieces of legislation in the Senate require 60 votes, which, given our intense partisanship and the even split of the Senate today of 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, is very hard to achieve 60 votes on anything. But reconciliation gives you the ability to spend money with just 50 votes. And so as a vehicle for getting the Biden administration agenda done, it's a easier way to do it than doing it through a normal legislative process.
The next question following that is, why should young people care about the Build Back Better Act?
It's really a potentially transformational set of investments. I think the thing to really remember about it is it's actually many different policies, many different new programs, all in one legislative package. So potentially, depending on what the outcome of it is, it could end up affecting many, many different aspects of our daily lives. Everything from how young kids access education, universal pre-K is one of the president's most strongly supported policies in the bill, all the way to how do we ensure that our economy is operating in kind of a clean energy kind of way, and that we're helping save the climate for future generations. In my area, which is workforce development, there's a possibility. We proposed $100 billion in the president's American Jobs Plan, which started this whole reconciliation process off, for things like subsidized jobs and apprenticeship and other workforce development models. And so there's a chance to potentially develop skill pathways for millions of Americans over the next 10 years or so. So there's so many different aspects of the bill. I really encourage everyone to research what's in the bill on topics that are of personal interest to you. And I think you'll find that there's just a lot of really meaningful policies in the bill.
As you know, Youth Action Hour is a youth-centered platform. In your work at the federal level, how often are young people considered in the conversations that happen in the Office of Management and Budget?
All the time. I mean, I think that one of the really cool things about OMB as an institution is that we're a really small organization. And so we have people working on every aspect of the federal budget and every aspect of what the federal government does from a policy standpoint. But we try really hard to think not narrowly about specific policies, but think globally about people, really a people-centered approach to policymaking. And I can tell you, personally, that youth, especially disadvantaged youth, are always a focus. And I'm constantly working with folks from across the whole domestic policy sector on better approaches to serving youth, to making sure that youth have intergenerational economic mobility, and that they're always youth are always a core focus.
For anyone watching this and thinking this might be a great career to pursue, can you share what you most enjoy about your work with OMB?
I think it's what I mentioned in my previous answer. It's the ability to kind of look at a 10,000-foot level across policy areas and really think about what is the best combined policy strategy to actually serve the needs of citizens, including youth. We're really lucky that we get to kind of work with the White House and also work with the federal agencies. And I think we get to play different roles in different rooms. But I think the unifying theme of all of it is really to make sure that we are bringing the best information, the best policy design, the best evidence about what works to all those conversations. And that just a really gratifying opportunity.